verse 10 is kind of telling as we read Judges about the whole kind of atmosphere and theme we're going to see in the book of Judges as you read through it. And yes, I wish we could read through all of it, but we just can't. It'd still be an introduction. We'd be here. We could just sit in Judges. But moreover, that entire generation was gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up after them who did not know Yahweh or the work he had done for Israel. So not only did they not know God as their God, they didn't even know what he had done for them. They forgot about the Exodus. They forgot about the crossing of the Jordan. They forgot about the conquering of the land. They forgot about what Joshua had done that quickly. Then it's right. There were supposed to be memorials the whole way to remind them. And there's not. I don't know what's happening with that. It does seem that way, that the generation before them, Joshua is a good example. There's no one that replaces Joshua. He doesn't say, nowhere in the Bible does, like Moses says, Joshua is going to take my place. Nowhere in the Bible does Joshua say, hey, this guy's going to take my place. It seems like the whole generation kind of had that attitude that no one's taking my place. We got into the land. I don't need to do anything else. We got our promise. We're set. There's no need to Yelene. Sorry, I can barely see you over there.
Oh, sorry. So you're saying that as a family unit, they weren't inclined as like the parents or the matriarch or patriarch to tell the stories on down?
They were supposed to. The question for those listening are online was they inclined as the patriarch or the matriarch to tell the stories on down the line? And in Deuteronomy, it's absolutely commanded to. And Joshua, they say, let's put up the 12 stones so that every time you pass by them, we'll remember them. But here it says, they didn't even know Yahweh or the work that he had done. So either not enough of them. I mean, I'm sure there were some that did. I mean, that's how it works, right? There's a faithful few in any generation, right? And some that did. But I don't know if they're not enough or they fell on deaf ears, the call of the Canaanites were strong. We will see the call of the Canaanites be a very big problem throughout the Scriptures. As they've gone into this promised land, they've conquered, they're supposed to kick the Canaanites out, and we're seeing that they don't. They don't kick them out. They just kind of live in the land with the Canaanites, and that's going to surround them with all these other influences. And so I think we probably have a mixture of things going on here. A lot of parents that, hey, we're here, that's good enough, and some of the kids are, we don't care. And
so besides that, then you're saying that the Levites and the general trend of what they were supposed to do on the holy days, they're not getting together, they're not going anyplace?
Actually, when you look at the Scriptures, the Levites rarely are seen in a good light. Rarely seen in a good light. They're actually seen failing. The priesthood is seen failing more often than it's succeeding in the Scriptures. And that's one of the reasons Jesus is from the line of Melchizedek, not the line of Levi. At least that's what I believe. And so these things, in the Bible, it says they didn't know the works they'd done. They may be following through with the religious practices.
Okay.
We don't know if they are or not. Actually, in several places in the book that we're about to go through, they're not. until one of the judges, one of the leaders, calls them back into it. But but they might have at certain points been doing these. But in Isaiah, it talks very much that very, very often in their history, and I think we should take note of this. We can be religiously active but not fervent in our belief. And I think we see a lot of that. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why churches are failing today is because we saw a lot of that. I'm not saying everyone in this room is that way. I'm saying we saw a lot of that across the United States. And a lot of religious activity, but not a lot of faith, not actual belief. And
ritual without the understanding.
Ritual without understanding. There you go. And I think there's a lot of that going on in here in the book of Judges as well. There's, they might be doing the religious things they're supposed to do. At least some of them are. But it says very clearly that they did not know Yahweh.
In his works.
But we need to take note for that too, Every generation. This, as it says, there rose up a generation that knew not know God. It reminds me of Exodus chapter 1. Yeah. There rose up a Pharaoh that did not know Joseph. Things need to change. But it shows us that every generation is just one generation away from failure. Every generation is one generation away from failure. And so we have to work doubly hard to raise up the next generation. Be diligent in teaching up and raising up disciples. All right. Let's talk Ford cycle. Not fix or repair daily. This is the basic pattern of the Judges. We're going to see this. This is an acronym that I was taught. It makes it easy to remember what's going on in the book of Judges, because this is kind of happening over and over and over and over and over and over. How many judges are there? Over and over and over again. The Ford cycle. There we go. Forsake God. The people turn away from God. No matter what's happened in the past, people are known for turning away from God. God has them oppressed. In the case of the judges, it's going to be often through other nations. God uses other nations to come in and oppress the Israelites. Now remember, the nation of Israel is in between two powerhouses, Egypt and Canaan. Also at the times of the judges, during periods of it, you're going to have the Hittites and the Philistines. So they're in between at least two powerhouses, if not three or four. And the Israelites control the trade routes. So they're going to be very hotly contested land that people are going to fight over all the time. And so God's going to allow these other nations to come in and defeat them because they're not listening to Him. That's the way it works. If you don't listen, and maybe the United States should pay attention to this. God can allow another nation to come into the United States and change us completely if we don't listen to Him. But God's anger always leads them to be oppressed by the enemy. But they'll repent because they're oppressed. We notice that we're in slavery once again. We're oppressed. And even in Jesus' time, the Romans are there oppressing them. They're always. This is the pattern all the way into Jesus' time. We're oppressed. And they will cry out to God, and God will hear their cries, just like He did in Egypt, after a period of time, and He will raise up someone to deliver the Israelites. And that's who these judges are going to be. Excuse me. all this junk moving in my lungs. All right. So the judges, very charismatic, gifted military leaders. They're able to elicit support and for specific causes. They are not going to be great kings or rulers or... in fact, most of them are not even that godly of men. They are going to be what God needs them to be. So let's look at the first judge, Othniel. Othniel is the first judge in the Scriptures. He is a minor judge. Now, when I say minor judge and major judge, it doesn't necessarily mean minor in like what they did and major in what they did. We have very little about Othniel and a lot about some of these other ones. Like, Samson. He's going to be one of the most famous of all the judges. And he's a major judge because we get a lot of writing about him. Othniel, not so much. We don't actually have that much writing about Othniel. In fact, his is 7 through 11. Let me see if I can bring that up. There we are. That's all we have on Othniel. He was a minor judge who delivered Israel from the king Cushan Rishathaimia of Aram. This king is not known from any other historical record. Very possibly a very minor king. But he's the king of Aram, and he came and oppressed the Israelites. And it says right off the bat why it happens. The Israelites did what was evil in the Lord's sight. And they forgot the Lord their God and worshiped the Baals. In this case, Baals and the Asherahs. This is in this sense, like Baal is a god, but in this sense, it's more like the gods and goddesses of the land. The way they're using it in the plural like that. So Baal represents all the different Canaanite gods, and Asherah represents all the goddesses of Canaanite. And the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he told the king Cushan Rishathaim, and I'm always butchering that one. And the Israelites served him 8 years, so they were in servitude for 8 years. And they cried out to the Lord, that's to Yahweh. And so Yahweh raised up Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's youngest brother. So he's related to Caleb. Remember who Caleb was? He was one of the spies that was blessed because he said, let's go do this. And everyone else said, no, they're giants. We can't do this. They're heroes of old, unconquerable foes. But it's Caleb's youngest brother, and as a deliverer of Israel, and the Spirit came upon him, and he judged Israel, in this sense, judged him with God's righteousness and justice. And Othniel went to battle, and the Lord handed over king to him, so that Othniel overpowered him, and they had peace for 40 years, and they died. Now, 40 years, there's a big argument. Anytime you see 40 years, is it literal 40 years, or is it a representative of the complete time until the next time it happened? And we can't answer that today because we just don't know. But people argue about this because 40 is that number that represents completeness. So he ruled over. So it basically says that there was peace for the rest of that generation. And then, whether it's a literal 40 years or a figurative 40 years, guess what? There's a time of peace, and then there's Again, the Israelites did what was evil in the Lord. Absolutely. It happens every time. You count how many judges there are, that's how many times they did it in the book of Judges. That's just the book of Judges. Again, Israelites did what evil Lord, so Yahweh strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel, because they did evil in the eyes of Yahweh. He gathered himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites, and he went to defeat. So this king gathers up two different peoples, Amorites and Amalekites, and what is actually distantly related to the Israelites. And they went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms. Now this is a minor judge. Israel served the king of Moab for 18 years, so this is even longer this time. And the Israelites cried out to Yahweh. So see that forsake God, has them oppressed. They repent. And then God raises up a deliverer. So Yahweh raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, son of Gera, a Benjaminite, a left-handed man. This is kind of fun.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
That's a fun one. I don't actually know why it's very significant, but there's a play on words here. Benjaminite means son of my right hand, and he's a left-handed guy. And he hides his sword, his double-edged sword. Probably it's a cubit in length, so we'd probably call it a knife. It's a cubit. It's probably like a Bowie, about the size of a Bowie knife. It's a cubit in length. It says for a short two-edged sword, a cubit in length, and he fastened it under his clothes on his right thigh. Which is interesting because if you're right-handed, most people are, you put blades on your left side. So the right-handed man, son from the right-handed, would normally carry his sword on the right-handed side. So people check on the right side for a sword. His is on his left thigh. His right thigh, because he's left-handed. And under his clothes on his right thigh, and then he presented a tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man, which has to do with his also his size, but also his splendor and how greedy he was, and he conquered. And he was conquered because he wanted the riches and the tribal, the taxes and the glory for himself. Greed. And so he was, and so a very fat man. When Ehud had finished presenting tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute, but he turned back from the sculptor's stone that was near Gilgal, where he was presenting it. I have a secret message for you. So he gets closer to him, and Ehud came to him while he was alone in his cool upper room, and I have a message to you from God. So he got up from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand for the sword on his right thigh and thrust it into his stomach, and the handle also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade because he did not draw back the sword from his stomach. Which means he was fat, and it protruded out his back. Then Ehud went out the vestibule and closed the doors of the upper room and locked behind them. And so he went out and they surely he is relieving himself. They thought he was in the bathroom. And they waited so long they became embarrassed because he didn't come out. So they took the key and opened the door, afraid they're going to walk in on the king. If you walk in on the king on the toilet, that's a death sentence right there. So they're embarrassed, but they go and check on him anyway. So they must have waited a while. So they opened the doors, and the Lord was lying on the ground dead, and Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed by the sculptor's son and escaped to Syria. And then he arrived and sounded a trumpet in the hills of Ephraim. The Israelites went down from the hill country with him, leading them. And he said, "Follow after me. Yahweh has given Moab, your enemy, to your hand." So they went down after him and captured the fords of Jordan towards Moab. And they didn't allow anyone to cross. They struck Moab at that time, about 10,000 men strong, all strong and able men. No one escaped. And Moab was subdued that day under the hands of Israel, and the land rested 80 years. So 2 generations. This was a big deal. Yet he was still considered a minor judge. But he delivers them in this very graphic way, showing the cleverness of Ehud and the foolishness and greed of the king. And interesting enough, and the Israelites, are going back and saying, "Hey, the Lord has given us this." And there's peace for 82 generations, 80 years. So apparently there was a time where they were worshiping God again. Because that's what usually, not always, but usually in the Scriptures, a time of peace, prolonged peace like that, represents a time in which they're worshiping the Father. But that doesn't last. They will continue on. The next judge is Shemagar. Let's see. All right, there we go. My thing is not working. Battery's dead. Cool. That's all right. It's working now. And Shemagar, son of Anath, came after him, and he killed 600 Philistines with a goad of an ox. What's an ox goad? Well, it's actually a pointy stick. That's really what it is. Sometimes it's made out of metal or whatnot, but it's to get the ox moving. You poke it, and it gets the bull going. Poke the bull, and he moves. And if you can get the bull going, all the cows follow after him. So you poke him. And so he was apparently this guy was maybe a tender of ox and cattle. We don't know. But he has this ox goad. And he delivers them from the Moabites by killing, from the Philistines, 600 Philistines. Now, people argue about whether that's a literal 600 or just, an over-exaggeration to show how many he killed. Like, did someone go through and count? To be honest with you, it doesn't matter. He killed a lot of them, and it goes to show, and part of that is this is written after the fact, where they're to show the easiness of how easy the Philistines were to slay, and making fun of the Philistines. And
did he kill them single-handedly?
It doesn't say. This is what it says. And Shemagar, son of Anath, came to him, and he killed 600 Philistines with the goad of an ox. That's what we have. That is all we have on the guy. We have no extra biblical information on him. We have that in the Bible. So, I don't know. I don't know how it looked. Apparently it was not important enough to give us more. The next one is Deborah. Now she is the first of the major judges. The first of the major judges is a female. You actually have the story really kind of told twice. 4, 1 through 24, and then 5, 1 through 31. You've got a prose form and a poetic form of kind of the same story. The poetry form is probably older. The older oral traditions tended to use poetry to help you remember things. And but we have Deborah. Now, the story takes place at Hazor. We haven't talked about Hazor, have we? You know what? There's a cool video on Hazor, but I have to go back to that computer over there. Let me get that video. It's a short video. I got it. I can walk. It's good for me. Here we go.
1,700 years before Jesus came, Hazor was a monumental, prosperous, and powerful city of the Canaanite people. The city had an allegiance to the Pharaoh of Egypt and was a stronghold, having trade relations with the superpowers of Babylon and Syria. Hazor was one of the most fortified and influential cities of the time. It was a capital of capitals, or as the book of Joshua puts it, it was the head of all those kingdoms. When the children of Israel conquered the kings of the southern lands of Canaan, word got back to the north country. King Jabin, the influential leader of Hazor, created a coalition of all the leaders and their armies of the region, a force vast and ominous. In spite of this, God delivered them into the hand of Joshua, and although all the region was conquered, Joshua completely destroyed the city of Hazor because it was the most powerful of the region and the leader of the coalition. Apparently, Hazor rebuilt, and under King Jabin were oppressing the people of Israel in the times of the judges. When Deborah was judge in Israel, she sent for the military commander Barak and instructed him to assemble a 10,000-person army and head north to Mount Tabor. Hazor's King Jabin sent his army commander, Sisera, along with 900 iron chariots to wage war. Sisera was defeated and fled on foot to the tent of a woman named Jael, who subsequently killed him with a tent peg while he slept. This loss destroyed the power of King Jabin and Hazor. During Solomon's reign, the city would become a highly fortified city again, along with Megiddo and Gezer. Solomon would draw conscripted labor from Hazor for the building of the first temple and for his own palace in Jerusalem. During the divided kingdom, Hazor became part of the northern kingdom of Israel. While King Pekah was reigning in Samaria, the Assyrians invaded under the leadership of King Tiglath-Pileser. The kingdom of Israel was conquered, and Hazor fell. The people were carried into exile from their homeland in an ongoing conquest by the Assyrians that would eventually bring an end to the northern kingdom of Israel. Today, Hazor is a massive archaeological site and a World Heritage Site. It was one of the first to be fully excavated when the modern Jewish state was formed after World War II. Its gorgeous location, with stunning views of Mount Hermon, and its strategic position reveal why it was prosperous and why it was contended for so many times in biblical history.
That video is actually part of a series you can watch on Faith Life TV, which the church provides access for you to if you sign up for our Faith Life groups. I'm always amazed at not only the content on here, but seeing the land of Israel like that is just so breathtaking, and I'm always amazed by it. But let's talk Deborah. As I come around the corner. Deborah. Now, see, in the time of Deborah, there's the king of Hazor, Jabin, and his general Sisera. Now, for Israel, you have Deborah the judge and Barak, her general. Now, Deborah in this passage, if you read it, is described as a prophetess. And she tells her general to go and fight Jabin. And he basically says, I'm not going unless you go. And he lacks the courage to go without her. And she at first doesn't seem to want to go. She says that I don't want a woman to get the credit for winning a battle. In that patriotic society at the time, this would actually be a disgrace on Barak. But he still won't go. When Jabin is defeated, Jabin is defeated, Sisera will flee to the tent of Jael, the wife of a Canaanite named Heber. Interesting enough, this general, Sisera, is so full of himself that he just marches into her tent and says, keep guard while I take a nap. Sure. Which I guess at the time, being part of that honor shame society and being hospitality rules being what they are. Remember, there are no hotels for him to check into. You relied on other people. Usually, you get their permission to invite you in, and whatnot. But so he is relying on these hospitality rules, and she would have been expected in many societies, being a woman, to take care of the man no matter who he is. And she sure does. She takes a tent peg or a spike and drives it into his temple into the ground. So, yeah, that's So that was the end of Sisera. So the heroes of the story of Deborah, interesting enough, are two women. Pretty unique for the scriptures, our Hebrew scriptures, in the patriarchic society that it was written in. But it's the first of the major judges is Deborah. And Deborah will get the credit, and so does, and Barak doesn't get the credit for killing Jabin. It was a woman with a tent peg. This is an interesting story. But it's a fun story. Like I said, read through it. It is really told twice, one in a poetic form and one in a prose form, which is, I guess, whichever version you like best. Good for you. The next of the major judges is Gideon. Now, Gideon is one that we all seem to know. He and that's because the only judge more stories are told about is Samson. Samson is the only judge that has more stories about him than Gideon. So we have a lot about Gideon. Gideon is the people of Israel are oppressed by the Midianites. And Gideon will be from the tribe of Manasseh. Which he says is the smallest tribe from the smallest, and he's from the smallest family in the smallest tribe. Which in our individualistic society, we're like, so what? But in an honor of shame society, based on your family outcome, family was everything. And and so he's like, I'm a nobody. I have no stature, no power, no authority, I'm nobody. And so when he is told by an angel to lead the fight against the Ammonites, you can hear, it's easy for us to say, well, why didn't he listen? It's an angel talking, but we got to remember that he's a nobody. And society is telling him, you're a nobody. It's been bred in him that you're a nobody. And Israel became very poor because of the presence of the Midianites, and Israel cried out to Yahweh. When the Israelite cried out on Yahweh on account of the Midianites, Yahweh sent a prophet to Israel, and he said to them, thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, I brought you from Egypt. I brought you from the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hands of Egypt, from the hands of your oppressors, and drove them out before you, and I gave their land. And I said to you, I am Yahweh, your God. Do not fear the gods of the Amorites in the lands you are living, but you have not listened to my voice. The angel of Yahweh came and sat under the oak that was at Ophrah, that belonged to Jehoash, the Abiezrite, and Gideon his son was threshing wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. So they were actually hiding wheat, food, in the winepress so they could at least have a little food to eat. That's how bad things have gotten. They've taken all their resources. The Moabites were taking all their resources. They were hiding food and tried to thresh food in the winepress because they weren't interested in the wine. They were interested in all their food. And the angel, it says the angel came and sat under him and paid. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him and said to him, Yahweh is with you, you mighty warrior. Now, he's the smallest of the small, hiding in the winepress, threshing wheat. Do you think he feels like a mighty warrior? Yeah, I like that. And Gideon said, "Excuse me, my Lord." If I kind of hear, "Excuse me," that's kind of how I hear it. But, it may have been very polite. If Yahweh is with us, then why has all this happened? Why are all these wonderful deeds and ancestors recounted to us, saying, "Did not Yahweh bring us up out of Egypt? But now Yahweh has forsaken us." I always like this. They always say Yahweh has forsaken us, but they forsake Yahweh first. Yeah. And we do the same thing in our own lives, right? Why has God done this? Well, we do it. We've chosen this path, or we started this, and maybe not us individually, but as a nation or as a group of people. I mean, even just back to Adam and Eve, we started this mess, and we still say, "Why have you done this, Lord?" But even Jesus, very human reaction. Even Jesus on the cross, right? "Why have you forsaken me?" Very humanness. Very human. Let's see, where was this? Let's see. "I am the weakest in Manasseh. I am the youngest in my father's house." And Yahweh said to him, "But I will be with you." I guess that's all that matters, right? That's what makes him a mighty warrior, is because Yahweh is with him. "And you will defeat Midian as if they are only one man." Now this time, unlike with Ehud, all he had to do was kill one man, and then they were able to wipe them out. This is going to be a little different. There's no one single man they're going to kill here. They're going to have to raise an army. But that's kind of an interesting, fun story too. We'll get there. And it says, "Please, if I found favor in your eyes, show me a sign that you are speaking to me." Now, this is probably one of the most preached about in the book of Judges, right? We preach on this one. Show me a sign, right? Very human of us. I mean, how many of you, don't raise your hand? That's okay if you want to give us a story, but I've prayed for a sign like this. Put out the fleece. Am I making the right decision? Is this really what God has called me to do? And Gideon went and prepared a young goat and unleavened cakes from flour, and he put meat in a basket, and he broth in a pot, and he put them under the oak and presented them. The angel said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour over the broth over," and he did so. And then the angel of Yahweh reached out the tip of his staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and the fire went up from the rock and consumed it. Now this is interesting. This is an act of sacrifice in a time that the Ark of the Covenant apparently has disappeared. It's not mentioned. We don't know where it is at this time. We find out later that it's in someone's house. By the time of King David, it's in someone's house. But Solomon, it's in the temple, and we don't know exactly where it's at in this time. Is it in the tabernacle somewhere? Where's the tabernacle? But this is a sacrifice that normally would have been done at the altar, in the tabernacle, with the Ark of the Covenant, in God's presence, and the angel here is saying, none of that. I'm here. God is present here now, and this is your sacrifice. And this is a sacrifice right there on the rock. We don't need the altar for this. What's here? We often lose because we get caught up in the rules of the Old Testament, that we lose that God is always present, and He offers them this religious practices, but He's also, it's the heart that matters, not all this other stuff that we can put on it. And so he went up, and the rock, and this was a sacrifice unto the Lord right there on the rock. And the angel went for a sign, and Gideon finally realizes that it was an angel, because the angels appear as men in the Old Testament. Most of the time, they're not like shining creatures from the heavens, or those appear to the priest in the prophetic times. But before that, in the time of the judges and Joshua and all, they appear as men. Abraham, they appear as men, and they're unable to know the difference. So that, I think that tells us something about these messenger gods. They're for us. To purvey messenger, these messenger beings. They're not for, and there are other heavenly beasts that apparently are different, like the cherub with this flaming sword, we wouldn't confuse that for a man. This angel messenger of God is very can be confused as a man. And he realizes man, and he says, "Oh Lord, for now I have seen the angel Yahweh face to face," which, remember, the face-to-face issue. We're struggling with that one. They know they're not supposed to see God face to face, but this is just a messenger. But they've seen it face to face. They come in face to face with the glory of God, because in the scriptures, an angel, when someone speaks for God, and we need to remember this as Christians, when we speak for God, it's as if God is speaking. And the angel of God speaks. It's as if God is there speaking, and that's very much what's on his mind. This angel spoke. That means God spoke. It's like they're interchangeable. And Yahweh said to him, "Peace be with you. Don't fear. You will not die." Because that's what's supposed to happen. If you see God face to face, you're dead. You can't survive it. And God says, "Don't fear, you will not die." And he built an altar there, actually built an altar and called it Yahweh is Peace. What a name. And it keeps going on. And the first thing he does, he said, "Take the bull of cattle that belongs to your father and a second 7-year-old and pull down the altar of Baal." So his father is worshiping the god of Baal. And cut down the Asherah pole. So the goddess pole, the pole of the fertility pole of Asherah, that's beside it. And build an altar to Yahweh on top of the stronghold in proper arrangement and burn it. So they're worshiping Baal and Asherah, the queen. So the king and queen of the chief deity of the Canaanites, and he says, build an altar, and I like this part. Oh man, I lost my place. Someone tell me which verse I was on. There we go. 27. And Gideon took 10 men from his servants, and he did just what Yahweh told him, because he was too afraid of his father's family, the men of the city, during the day. He did it during the night. So he's like, well, I know you're God, and I told you, and you showed me that you're God, but this mighty warrior is so afraid of the other men, he's going to do it at night. He's a mighty warrior. Yeah.
Even with the other judges that preceded Gideon, I think he had the hardest part of all.
You think Gideon had the hardest part?
Because he had to tear down
Well, that
altar where they worship.
That is true. He's the first one mentioned to tear down the other gods. And interesting enough, that's how he starts his judge time. It's not like leading like Ehud just stabs a guy, right? Which is, but this is kind of scary, The other guy, he just fought. Gideon is one of the favorite judges because it is the most applicable to our spiritual walk. That sometimes we have to tear down. That's why he's preached on more than any of the other judges, because we can directly relate this to ourselves. First thing you have to do, right? Kick out the other gods of your life. If you want to walk with God, the first thing you got to do is kick out the other gods. In this case, it's opposing his father too, and sometimes it does come on opposing those who are close to us, friends, families. Neighbors that were. Yeah, is it stealing? It could be seen that way. He definitely didn't get permission for this, but at being his son, he might have had the right to take what he needed for sacrifices. So we don't know if it was like stealing or if it was just part of his right as child. Now, taking down the altar of Baal, definitely a no-no. And actually it says so right here next. They do it at night. And the men of the city said to Joash, the father, "Bring your son so that he may die." For he pulled down the altar of Baal and cut down the Asherah pole that was beside it. But Joash said to all who stood him, and now Joash is taking up his son's defense. At least there's that. He could have turned him over. He says, I like this. This is one of my favorite lines in the story. Let Baal contend against him. He says, whoever contends with him will be put to death by the morning. If he is God, let him contend for himself, because his altar is pulled down. So basically he's saying, let Baal deal with it. It's his altar. Let Baal strike him dead. If Baal is real, if Baal is there, cares so much, if Baal is so powerful that you're afraid of him, let Baal do it. Of course, we hear the same kind of attitude often with Christians, let God come and do it. And so it's easy when it's ours, when we're the victors, but God often uses people to be his tool agents. But he's saying, let's contend with Baal. And so it was, but he says, let him contend with himself, because all has been pulled down. Thus, on that day, he was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend against him. So he's saying, let Baal fight the battle. He's going to fight with Baal himself. And so the angel took possession of Gideon, and he blew the trumpet, and they were called to follow him, and they sent the messengers throughout Manasseh, and they followed him. And he's the next, judge. He's the next ruler. He's the next one who's going to deliver them. And he starts to gather, because he contends with Baal himself and wins over this victory, the staring contest, with the God, Baal. Yahweh is bigger. Now they say that Gideon is the one he's going to be, they're going to start following him. And he's going to lead us out of this time of oppression. And after all that, Gideon still struggles. So he has a test for the Lord. And this is probably the most part we remember most. We forget he contends with Baal first. He tests the Lord. If you will deliver Israel for me, like you said, let the wool be damp with dew on the ground around it. But, damp with only, dew on the wool, not on the ground. And it happened, and then the next night, let the wool be dry and everything around it be wet. Let's test it. And I like the patience with God. He's sent an angel. He's proven that it was an angel. He recognizes an angel. He contended with the other gods against him. He's called all the men to follow him, and he's still patient with him enough to say, okay, I'll prove it one more time, 2 more times. God's awesome like that. I'm glad he puts up with us. So they call to arms, and he calls to arms, and 32,000 men come to his call. 32,000 men, and God looks at him and says, all right, you got too many. Too many people answered the call. Now, this is not what you want to hear if you're going to fight another army. The more, the merrier. So Gideon says, we got too many. God said, and so 22,000 of them leave. That means 10,000 are remaining. And God, this is surely the army. We're going to do it 10,000 men, 10,000 strong. And God says, you got too many still. He says, take them to the river. Test them. Bring them the river to drink. And those who get on their bellies to drink, remember, they don't have life straws. They don't have water fountains and 7-Elevens they can go get water bottles at. Those who get on their stomachs to drink, send them away. They're not ready. But those who cup their hands, and can stare out at, be ready, those are the ones, those are the true fighters. We want only the true fighters. Only the soldiers that can fight. So those who bring the water up to their mouths. Those are, because that's how you look. If you're on your belly, you can't see what's going around you. We want those. Those are the ones we want. So after that, there are 300 men left. So 32,000 to 300. That's the capacity of this room. 1%. So go from 32,000, which is, pushing an arena, to the capacity of this room. That's crazy. Why would God do this? Because he can. God's going to show off his power. He's been showing off this whole time. He does have a purpose. And Gideon divides his army into 3 parts, giving each soldier a torch. And it hides it under a pitcher so that it's not seen, and a ram's horn trumpet. And he places them around, waits till the Midianites fall asleep. Upon signal, they ran down into the camp, torches waving and yelling, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. The men wake up, and they probably thought every Israelite is attacking, and there's confusion, and the Midianites run. They surrender in the confusion. And all they had to do was wave light around. There's something in there that could preach. Let me think about that. I could come up with a sermon right there. And they wave the light, and it frees them. All right. Well, it is 7:06. Oh my goodness, I've been having too much fun. I didn't realize it was that late. Well, we will pick up with Abimelech next week. Do you have any questions before we close? You have a statement. Okay.
I was thinking about when Gideon asked, test God. I was thinking about Malachi 3:10, to bring all the tithes to the storehouse, and then he says, "Test me."
Oh, where God says, "Test me."
Yeah.
It's there is the correlation. He allows people to test him, and sometimes even encourages it. Hey, you test me, I'm going to show you what I can do. And that's what Gideon's all about, right? I'm bigger than Baal. I'm bigger than Ashura. I'll show you what I can do. I'm going to run off these people with 300 men with torches. I can do it. And the great warrior doesn't even have to swing a sword. That's pretty cool. But the warrior part is he contends with Baal himself, and Baal is nothing. God is bigger. All right, Abimelech. Yeah. Let's go ahead and pray, and I'll pick up with Abimelech. I could keep going. I'm having too much fun. All right, Father God, we praise you today, Lord. We thank you for this wonderful blessing. We thank you for this opportunity just to worship you. We pray that we continue in this vein and that we just enjoy your scriptures and the studying it. And Lord, we never grow tired of growing close to you in such a way. Lord, we thank you and we worship you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Miss Angel, I saw you sneak in there.
Amen. Hallelujah.